Well, for everyone out there on YouTube who's self-isolating with us, hello and welcome to episode 3 of On Liberty, coming to you live from the Centre for Independent Studies in Sydney, Australia. I'm your host, Salvatore Babones, and joining me today is CIS policy analyst Monica Wilkie, who will be talking to us about the perils of self-isolation. Monica Wilkie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Salvatore. How are you?
Good. Look, I'd like to lead off by asking you to share your thoughts about self-isolation. What do you think we lose when it comes, when it comes to my family? Maybe what do we gain when we give up the opportunity for face-to-face interaction?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me on this episode, and thank you all to those people out there in YouTube land who are currently connecting in, dialing in. I mean, it's fantastic that we have these technologies, but as I think we're going to explore today, that there are always downsides with these things. And as you said, with self-isolation, we know the dangers. What happens when people are deprived of physical face-to-face contact. I mean, it's fantastic that we have these communicative technologies like this now. Right. We have Skype, we have Zoom, we have FaceTime, and undoubtedly, if we didn't have these technologies, we would be in a far worse situation. If people didn't have the ability to work from home, there would be a lot more unemployment and things would be an awful lot worse.
Right.
But there are just very basic fundamental needs that we all have that we cannot currently meet with these technologies. Simple things like eye contact. So even though we're currently teleconferencing and I can see your smiley face and you can see my face and the viewers can see that, at no point are we going to actually directly make eye contact. And we know how important that is for gauging emotions, for gauging reactions to engaging people. So that's a simple thing that we're currently missing. Also things like handshakes. Embracing a loved one, a warm pat on the back, a high five after a victory. All of these things that we don't notice when we have them suddenly become very important when we're all disconnected from each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's certainly societies where people aren't always hugging and high-fiving. There are a lot of societies where social distancing is the norm, where, maybe you bow or a salam alaikum or, some very distant interactions with people other than the very closest people in your family, whom, let's face it, in self-isolation, many of us are not self-isolating, we're family isolating. So aren't we just, doing what a lot of people do anyway?
Well, I think on the idea that there are societies that distance most of the time, that's the norm. You gave the example of people bowing. That certainly exists, but that's not the society that we have. We're very tactile. When you meet someone, you shake their hand for the first time. You look them in the eye, and even in those societies where there is that physical distance anyway, you're still seeing people face to face. So you are getting things like eye contact. You are getting a better sense of their facial expressions and all those sorts of things. So even in societies that are more distant than us, they still have more face-to-face contact than what we're currently having. And even though there are people, like you said, many of us are self-isolating, we're with our families, we live with other people, flatmates, that sort of thing. I mean, we have more people now than ever, according to the last census, who do live alone. So they're at higher risk as well. I mean, there's also the if you're in a home, all the time and you don't have those releases where you can go out, then there is a risk as well that, tensions can build up within homes. So I think there's that risk as well.
Yeah, but I want to push you a little bit on this because I'm an expat here. I assume you're Australian,
yes.
Or not, but and as an expat, honestly, I'm used to living life with only my closest connections here, and everyone else is at a distance. I work at a university, so we don't hug, we don't. Often at a university, we don't even talk to each other, and I don't have parties, I don't go to barbecues, and I'm perfectly fine. At least I think I am. So I think those of us who are expats maybe think this is just all normal. I mean, does it matter? Do you think whether someone's used to it or not used to it? Is this a matter of just what we're accustomed to?
I think what we're accustomed to could be a part of it as well. But I mean, even if you're talking about, I mean, the situation you just described with yourself, I mean, you're an expat, maybe those stronger connections are far away or in another country most of the time. But even someone who, might be an introvert or might normally say that they don't go out a lot, don't go to parties, they would still have more face-to-face human interaction in their daily lives than what we're currently having now.
Right. Right. And is that a problem? I mean, okay, people want to have a party and they're not. Does that have any long-term effect? I mean, do we really know that that's going to hurt anybody, or is it just an inconvenience?
Well, I think it's a little bit more complicated than people just not being able to have parties. So, interestingly, September last year, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare actually put out a report on social isolation and loneliness. So those two things are slightly different. So social isolation is when you have minimal contact with other people. And there's a lot of literature about the long-term impacts of that, premature death, mental illness, depression, increased risks of substance abuse, smoking, decreased physical activity. All of these sorts of things have been documented when people are socially isolated. And that report goes on to say how those things can possibly be minimized. So things like, participating in sports, participating in community activities, right. making sure you go out and interact with people. Now, at the moment, those things are banned. We can't go out and join in team sports. We can't go out and interact with the community. And although I agree that things like this are very helpful, and they will go a long way in mitigating a lot of these impacts. But I think we sort of have a perfect storm at the moment where people are losing their jobs, or they've lost wages, or they are at risk of losing their job or lost wages in the near future. And we normally tell people in those situations, make sure you keep a routine, make sure you go out and visit friends, visit family, keep some sort of normalcy to keep your spirits up. At the moment, people can't do that.
But this is something that, I mean, I'm sorry to make a little fun of this, but I heard an executive from Unilever speaking on the radio. She said that Unilever is this global, company, global food producer who've been tracking what people are binge buying in different places. And you mentioned alcohol and cigarettes. I thought it was hilarious that in the United Kingdom, alcohol has been Unilever's big spike in volume. In the United States, it's been 5-gallon tubs of ice cream. It tells you what our priorities are in different countries. But either way, right? I mean, binge drinking or binge ice cream is not going to do you a lot of good.
No, it's not. And it's interesting. Yesterday, YouGov put out some polling around this issue, asking people about their mental health their mental health during this crisis. And the number 1 and 2 stresses for people were not being able to see their friends and not being able to see their family. Those 2 stresses came above not being able to potentially pay bills or losing losing unemployment. Yes, so those were the 2 main. And then they also asked people about their level of physical activity, and about, I think it was 27% of people say they're exercising less during this time. They're also eating more unhealthy than they were during this time. So I think those, we're sort of compounding these factors. And I think even though people are already feeling the stresses, I don't think we're going to see the potential long-term negative effects psychologically and health-wise. I mean, we know the negative health consequences of physical inactivity and eating poorly, but those things are going to take a long time before we see the effect. So it's going to be a negative, slow burn.
Right. Let me take a moment. So everyone at CIS, of course, is also self-isolating, and CIS is an independent, nonprofit organization that gets all of its money from its public supporters. It takes no government money at all under any circumstances. Please go to the website now, cis.org.au, click the red donate button. If you're not a member, please become a member. Membership categories start at, I believe, $40 for the friendship level, and CIS would love to have you as a member. And of course, also click the subscribe button on the YouTube channel here. We'd love to have more subscribers. We're pushing 10,000, and if we can get to that 10,000 mark, nothing will happen except it'll go over the 10,000 mark. But as you can see, that would make Monica very happy to hear if we did. So speaking of the internet and technology, you warned on April 9th in your Ideas column. Ideas comes out every Friday from CIS, and you were in last Friday's Ideas, that, quote, a failure of our technology could wake us up to the fragility of our entire lives. And you specifically cited the MyGov crash when people seeking job seeker registrations crashed MyGov. Zoom security problems. We've all come to depend on Zoom, but there have been worries that it is not as secure as we think. Do you think technology is, a savior for us, a lifesaver that's getting us through this, or do you see it as potentially something that is going to be compromised?
Well, it's at the moment it's both. Right? So okay. As I said at the beginning, I mean, if we didn't have these technologies, even simple things like the what we now think is simple cloud technology, so we can access our files and all these sorts of things wherever we are, which would make if you didn't have that, transitioning from an office to working from home would be an
right.
awful lot more difficult. So at the moment, these technologies have proved absolutely fantastic. But the point I was getting at in that piece was, and the way I've been thinking about particularly this pandemic is, I don't think any of us late last year or either early this year would have thought that this is where we would be in mid-April 2020. I mean, it's taken us all completely and totally by surprise. And I was just working through the idea of, if something were to happen, there was a hack or our technology was to fail or something like that, do we have a plan B? And considering how reliant we all are on these technologies, is it even possible to do that? So I think it's an interesting idea about preparedness and redundancy as well. Is this the only plan? There is no plan B because we can't possibly have one.
Now we have Mike joining us from Pittsburgh. Shout out to Mike in Pittsburgh, my former colleague at University of Pittsburgh. And that brings to mind the fact that brings to mind the fact that Australia's internet connection to the rest of the world sometimes feels like sipping through a straw to get the internet. Telstra CEO Andy Penn suggested that we should be internet rationing. That is, to be considerate of other people, wait till midnight to download that, 400 gigabyte movie that you want. What do you think about this? Should we be rationing our internet use?
I mean, it's sort of, that goes as well to what I was talking about earlier with a perfect storm of, social pressures and social isolation and all that kind of things that are going on. I mean, it's nice to think that we could internet ration, and with some things that would be possible. So, if you were downloading a movie, maybe you could do it overnight. But we've all been told that because we have this technology and because we can work from home, we have to do it in order to save lives, in order to stop the spread of coronavirus, in order, to make sure if we're okay that we're not endangering other people and the more vulnerable. So we're being told to do this, and then it's like, oh no, but don't do it too much. But we have to, by the nature of the situation, we have to do it more. So I'm not quite, I think that's just a completely unreasonable thing to expect of people. I mean, we need to talk to family, friends, we need to work. Right. Sometimes, we just have to be online at the same time now. Right. So it doesn't really work practically.
But let's be honest with ourselves. Most internet usage is not this fundamental stuff we're doing, connecting with families and friends and going to work. Most internet usage is downloading movies and watching pornography. Just to be perfectly frank about where internet use is coming from. And should people be just conscious of that? I mean, should people be downloading movies the night before rather than at 7 p.m. when everyone wants the internet? That's when everyone clogs it up. Or should we just say it's the company's problem to provide the service?
I mean, if people can do that, sure, but what we're seeing right now is because everyone is using the internet more all the time, usage has increased, and the peak hours have extended out so much as well. So I just think it's unreasonable.
All right. Well, Gay wants to know, she asks if you're well, and Gay, we covered that. She's very well, thank you.
Yes. Hi, Gay.
But do you feel positive about the government's ability to pull us through the negatives of what lies ahead?
I feel far more positive about individuals and community spirit's ability to pull ourselves ahead, just purely on a psychological level. I mean, the government's obviously announced various spending packages and that sort of thing that would help people make ends meet during this time. But we absolutely have to rely on ourselves and each other to make sure that we come out the other side mentally strong as well. I mean, doing things like this is important, because even though, Gay, I would much rather be in the CIS offices having this conversation over a glass of wine, as we've done many times. I mean, this, at least we can have some level of interaction, and I think we have to rely on the community to make sure that the bonds are strong, even a digital virtual community for the time being.
Right. I mean, let me just ask you, if you had to pick one government, would you pick your state government, New South Wales, or would you go for the national government? Who's performing in this crisis?
As a libertarian, Salvatore, you can't ask me to pick a government. It just goes against everything I believe in. But no, I mean they're both handling it in different ways. I mean, there's my colleague Peter Curdy has written about the concerns about how New South Wales is enforcing the various social distancing and public health measures. So I think that's something to be aware of. And the CIS is currently pulling together a project where we're going to be examining how the government responded and in terms of the advice that they were given at the time. So
that's a top secret, as far as I know. That's a top secret project.
No, we're letting our members know what we're doing. So I'm not going to say anything more. You'll have to get me back to find out the details.
Oh, but it is a good opportunity for me to plug the contributions again. If you'd like to support CIS's pandemic work, and CIS does have a lot of pandemic-related work in the pipeline, CIS needs your support. Please go to the CIS website, cis.org.au. Don't forget the AU, or you'll end up at an American immigration site. If you go to cis.org.au, you should see the familiar green and white logo. Just click the donate button. Of course, we'd even more like to have you as a member, so if you're not already a member, click the membership button. I think the friendship level of membership, which gets you 99% of the perks, starts at just $40. And of course, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Monica, we have a question from Octavian the 4th to be specific. As we come out of the crisis, what responsibilities do you think individuals have to repair their communities?
Very good question, Octavian the 4th. Thanks for asking it. But yeah, I think we have to be aware of how important these social bonds are, and the things that I spoke about at the beginning in terms of, you know, the mechanisms that can be used to alleviate social isolation. So being involved in team sports, your community, volunteering, those sorts of things. And I'll be interested to see what happens when we get on the other side of this, as the favorite phrase for our politicians to use is, well, I would hope that this would sort of reinvigorate a community spirit, because if we've been deprived of these things we don't know how long that's going to be. And I think that the not knowing adds a level of anxiety to it as well. That's not helpful. So I would like to think that we would be able to reinvigorate a community spirit, especially after a period of deprivation.
Right, but Octavian followed up. Do we have duties as well as, of course we're all free to help get things started or remake society or keep society running. Do we have any duties to do so?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think every right has a corresponding duty to it.
Well, but what should, in practical terms, if we're going to, hopefully this crisis will be over soon. My own prediction, for what it's worth, is that we'll be back to work in May. I've proposed May 4th May the 4th be with you as a start date for getting back to work. What should each of us do? I mean, right now we've been told what you need to do is stay home. What you need to do is do nothing. Well, any ideas for what we can do to do something? Once May rolls around and it's time. I mean, famously, back in the September 11th crisis in the United States, George W. Bush said, "Go shopping. The most patriotic thing you can do is go shopping." Well, is the patriotic thing to do in May go buy a car? I mean, what should Australians be doing when the crisis is over?
Well, first of all, I think you're very brave to make predictions publicly. I have a nasty habit of coming back to people, but I think what people can do during this time, I mean, staying connected obviously is important. I mean, I know that there's a YouTube chat going on right now as we do this live stream and people interacting with each other and all that sort of thing. I think that helps. I mean, there's a variety of online communities as well for all sorts of interests, and you can find people in your local area. So I think doing that sort of thing is very helpful. And then once we're out of this, plan to actually meet up. So if you have a particular sporting interest or a book club or something like that, I think that's helpful. And I think during this time as well, I mean, always trying to find a silver lining is that we've all kind of been forced to slow down a little bit. So it could be a good time to maybe do some projects, those things that you always put off. It's like, oh, maybe there's a book you've always meant to read and now's the time to do that. Certain home improvements, maybe you want to sew more or, something like that. I mean, we still have online shopping, so you can get things to you as well. I think it's a time to sort of slow things down and learn some skills. And then, on the other side of that, you could possibly, turn that into something as well. I mean, there's various online universities and online courses as well. So you could even think of during this time of reskilling or upskilling yourself. And I think that helps as well to sort of alleviate some of the feelings of anxiety and despair. If you can have a goal for yourself, like, in the next month or 2 months, I want to have read this book, or I want to complete this online course, and then you've got the next step as well. And I think that helps with those community bonds as well that we're talking about.
Actually, I know this is a bit out of the blue, but let me ask you about that upskilling idea, because, of course, Dan Tehan, the education minister, has been talking about micro courses, so that, encouraging universities to offer these 6-month short courses that people can do to upskill to get a certificate of some kind. Now, the certificates don't even exist yet, right? The government is promising to rush through legislation to create a new category of, 6-month certifications from universities. I know this is not, something you've been thinking about. We're just fully, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Is this a good idea? Should, short courses for people in pandemic?
It would depend the practical applications, and I mean, just the way you outlined it. Then, if there's a certificate that doesn't exist, I would be concerned that people would do a short course and then it actually wouldn't have anything. So, maybe you do this course thinking it gets you a particular skill or job, and then out the other side you don't have. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, exactly. So I think possibly it could be a policy done a little bit too quickly. But I mean, these things already exist. There's open universities. There's various. The names are escaping me right now, but I know there's various online courses you can do. I don't know if we need to recreate something out of thin air. I mean, there's TAFE you can do online and those sorts of things. Various private colleges that offer online courses. So I think if people were interested in upskilling, they could look at those sorts of things.
Right. And there are lots of private colleges who really could use the business right now, I suppose, of getting people into their already established certificate programs.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we have a question from our CIS colleague, Peter Curti. Peter Curti asks, are you worried about the new digital surveillance being ushered in by many governments to combat the coronavirus?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the question, Peter. Good to connect with you digitally. I think I'm absolutely very concerned about where this is going. So I know the Morrison government has come out and said that they're interested in using a Singaporean app where it traces, where people have have been and how much contact if you spent more than 15 minutes with someone who's possibly infected and all that sort of thing. And various other countries have implemented this as well. And, you know, the problem with these sorts of technologies is twofold. So it's the potential for misuse, and also what happens when we're on the other side of this crisis. I mean, in Australia, the metadata laws are a good example. So they were used supposedly to combat terrorism and make Australians safer. That was the argument for their introduction. And then you had councils asking for access to the information so they could follow up people for minor infractions like littering and those sorts of things.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So potential for misuse is quite high. And in South Korea, they've actually also introduced a similar app to track coronavirus. And I mean, it's had some very, very damaging effects in terms of privacy. So even though the information is de-identified, it doesn't say the person's name, it has enough information so people can figure it out. And there's been stories of, you know, people being like, oh, you know, this person has coronavirus, here's their name and they live here, and then they're getting threats and they're getting online abuse and all that sort of thing. So I think it's a technology that we just should very much shy away from, because it'll just, I mean, we already have a lot of surveillance. So like I said, we have metadata laws, and we have all these things already. I just think we just cannot open that door. And from what the government tells us as well, the measures that they've introduced so far have flattened the curve. Even though they've said that, you know, we can't relax the restrictions, we shouldn't think that we've won, but we're heading in the right direction. I don't see why we have to introduce a technology that will undoubtedly be misused and all the negatives that will come from that when we're told that we're on the right track already.
Right. Now, thanks for that. And I told you we had some viewers from as far away as Pittsburgh in the United States, but I have to say our reach has gone even deeper into deep space, because Michael from Liverpool, New South Wales is actually online with us, and that's about as remote as it gets. Michael says, you know, from the southwest suburbs, I have never seen so many people out and about on the footpaths, families with prams, with pets of all sizes, kids on bikes, appear to be enjoying the new experience. Is it possible that, in fact, being locked down at home has actually made us rediscover our public spaces?
I think for some people, I think that's definitely the case. But as always with a lot of policies and interventions, there's the unintended consequences. So I know in some areas they're actually talking about closing certain parks and footpaths because they're overcrowded. Even though we're allowed to go out and exercise, that's one of our pre-approved activities that we can do during
one
this
of 12.
time. Yeah. I thought there was only 4. I think that New South Wales said there were 4, but I know exercise is definitely one of them. However many we have. But I think as well. I mean, just from my personal experience, I now go out for 2 walks a day. So I think that, you know, we don't know if the people who are out and about, if it's just the same people going out quite often or if it's a bunch of different people. And as I said, the YouGov survey that I cited earlier in this conversation, it found that a decent portion of people were exercising less than before. So I think it's good that people out in Liverpool are enjoying the sunshine and that sort of thing. But I mean, this is early days at the moment. We don't know if that'll keep up. But I'm glad things are looking rosy in Liverpool.
That's good news. Look, our CIS colleague Greg Pulsher has 2 questions for us. So the first one is, would everyone please press the subscribe button and subscribe to the YouTube channel to get us over 10,000 subscribers? But his second question is maybe even more. Oh, Greg has 4 questions. Okay, Greg. Well, his second question was, will this crisis make Australians more ready to give up personal liberties in exchange for security? What do you think?
Well, to his first point, I completely agree. everyone needs to subscribe, and also if they can give the video a like so we can boost our numbers and get our important message out there. So right. I'll agree with that one first, Greg.
And the more likes, I should stress to everyone, the more likes we get, the more likely other people are to be shown this video. So please do press the like button, please do subscribe. But Monica, sorry to cut you off. Are we likely to give up these liberties permanently?
That is a real concern of mine, that people will, I mean, so far we've been very willing to give up our liberties and to do as we're told. I mean, people point out examples, every now and then where a group goes to the beach or people, disobey the current rules or whatever. On the whole, everyone is being remarkably obedient. Most people are doing what they're being told. They're social distancing, they're not going out, they're working from home when they can, they're not having parties, that sort of thing. And I worry now that this threat has been introduced in the same way that I was talking about the technology, and we had no idea, the 31st of December 2019 that this is where we would be, the 16th of April 2020. I think people are now aware of the threat of a pandemic, and they're concerned, they're frightened, absolutely all understandable emotions. Right. And we're going to have to, as we come out of this, we're going to have to wrestle with the question of, how much are we willing to give up in order to ensure this doesn't happen again?
Right. Now, we're going to be wrapping up soon. We'll take a final round of questions. And also, I'm sorry to everyone for continuing to spruik this, but, CIS really could, not only could CIS use the funding, but this show could use the funding in the sense that if people contribute during this hour of our live stream, CIS is much more likely to devote the resources to keeping us on air. And so please do, go to the site, cis.org.au. Greg, please put that donate link back in the comment section. And we'd love to have, a donation of whatever size. We do have a question, this question from Mark. Mark asks, is it possible that this experience has given us as a society the opportunity to prioritize our family and prioritize spending time with our family rather than, wealth building goals or just going to work every day? I mean, has this crisis really been good for the family?
Well, thanks, Mark. That's a good question, and something I've been pondering as well. I wonder, when we're on the other side of this and we can go to restaurants and cafes and that sort of thing, is there going to be just an explosion and everyone's going to be absolutely dying to get out of the house and away from their family, and all of those things will see a boom, or will this be a permanent change in behavior? I mean, at the moment we just don't know. And I think, as I was talking about, the way that we could handle this as a community level in terms of slowing down and that sort of thing, I think people will have an opportunity to reconnect with the family or the people in their house. But I mean, at the moment, this is very early days. I mean, the way everything's moved, it sort of feels like we've been in this lockdown. I think, unless it's just me, it feels like we've been in an awful lot longer than what we have been. And if it carries on, we don't know when it's going to end. And those other pressures that I was talking about in terms of loss of income, loss of job, those sort of things, if those keep mounting, I think that could possibly negate the early beneficial effects of people reconnecting with their family.
All right, so we have a few final questions, a lightning round sort of. Peter asks us, why are we simply accepting that governments are right to take our rights by simply asserting that they know what's best? Why are we accepting government guidance on what's best for us instead of making our own decisions?
Sure. I think it's fear. I think just on a very fundamental level, I think there's something particularly frightening to people about a pandemic and something that's infectious. I mean, we don't know, it's something we don't know who has it, we don't know when we can possibly get it. It makes interacting with other people a necessary and enjoyable activity all of a sudden dangerous. Well, I think people, I mean, and it's also not, it's not a threat you can easily point to. It's not like, there's a fire, run in the other direction. It's potentially everywhere and nowhere. So I think just on if I would if I would reduce my answer to that very good question to one word, it would be fear.
Right. Gay is asking us, she says she's doing an experiment at present by getting everything she needs by home delivery, so they don't have to go out to the house other than to exercise. Do you think that's going to be the new norm?
Most people delivering from home, deliveries. Yeah, I think so, particularly if, even though the government's had various, JobKeeper and JobSeeker and all those sorts of packages, there will be businesses we know that just won't come back. So I think if they can pivot to online, or more people are going online, I think absolutely we could see a even bigger. It was trending that way anyway, and if people get used to it, if they find out that it's more convenient, I think that could absolutely be the future. Because people realize it's not just grocery you can get online. You can get absolutely anything. The only caveat I would add to that is if there's massive delays at the moment due to surges in demand.
Now, Mike is asking us, and I don't know if you've read the article. I haven't. Apparently, Edward Snowden had an article on Vice about medical agents of social control, essentially all of the apps that governments are using to track people on their phones. Who's going to keep this in check? Who's watching the watchers when it comes to the people who are starting to monitor our online data for our own health?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I haven't seen the article, Mike. Thank you. I'll have a look at that. I think unfortunately the answer is no one, because it can't. I don't think it can possibly be done, because once they have this information, the thing about particularly online privacy is once you give up that information, you have no control on what happens to it, and that's not always to say that it'll be used for nefarious purposes, but it absolutely can. During this time, cyber attacks and hacks have increased. Information can just be mishandled. We saw what happened when people tried to access the MyGov website and that crashed. And when we tried to do our census online a few years ago in Australia, that just didn't work. I don't think anyone will be watching it. And like I said, once you give it up, you can't get it back.
Right. We have a question from Dream Runner, which is true. Is really, it hits my heart because I just published an article on this. In the new technology of the internet, are we as society starting to accept the digital age as the primary reality, whereas it was previously the secondary reality?
Thanks, Dream Runner. That's a good question. I think the interesting thing about this moment as well is that we've had these technologies for a while. So we've been able to Skype, teleconference, do all these sorts of things for quite a while. And most people chose to use it in a limited sense. They still went into an office, they didn't work from home, they met up with each other, those sorts of things. Now we've been forced into it. I wonder if on the other side people are going to be happy with this, or there'll sort of be a rebellion. I'm kind of leaning towards, I think, the second option, in that, we're going to be so hungry for face-to-face interaction and for human connection, and particularly if you have not a great internet connection and you're trying to have these conversations and it's buffering and it's just not working. So I think we could possibly see not exactly an opposite of rebelling of technology, but I don't think that we're going to see a massive revolution that'll be that different to what it was before. I think there'll be changes in behavior. People might work from home more. There might be more flexibility, but I don't think it's going to be this huge, massive societal shift to mostly online.
Now we're going to have to go to the final question. Shout out to my brother Pete, who is watching from Baltimore, Maryland, and who has asked this question. We're going to go to it, but first, I just we have more than 60 people watching right now. Please just press that thumbs up button. 60 are watching, only 15 have pressed the thumbs up. We'd love to have everyone liking this video. Also, please subscribe to CIS in the subscribe button you'll see down there. Ring the bell if you want to get notifications. We'd love to have your support on the website. That's cis.org.au. Click the donate button. Every $10 helps. Also, the more donations we bring in from this program, the more likely it is CIS will put the resources in to keeping us on the air every week. So, Pete, thanks for the question. And that was, I know all the arguments against herd immunity, but isn't that what we'll ultimately have to embrace to get beyond this?
As I'm not a health expert or an epidemiologist, I'm not across whether herd immunity is going to completely work or not. But I think this goes to a point that I know you, Salvatore, raised in a previous piece for The Australian that's now on the CIS website, in terms of we need an end game out of this. And we need some metrics so we know what can be unlocked and when. And I think that's really what the government needs to communicate, because is their plan total eradication? Or are we going to be living like this until we're at 0 new cases? Or are we going to see some benchmarks in terms of, once there's this many new cases a day, then that's when we can slowly start to lift some restrictions. And I know in that piece that I mentioned, you outlined, the agriculture sector and those sorts of things that could possibly be unlocked first. But I think that's what has to be communicated from the government, because we don't know what they're thinking. Are they moving towards a herd immunity strategy, or is it complete eradication?
Right. Well, I'll just read one final comment out from Inez. Inez says, ask Boris about herd immunity, referring to Boris Johnson. The UK went for herd immunity and it went horribly wrong. That's Inez's 2 cents on that. Thanks, Inez, for watching. Thanks, everyone, for contributing. We really do appreciate it. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks especially to Monica Wilkie. Thanks, Monica, for your time this morning and for all of your insights. Really appreciate it. I'd also like to thank our producer, Max Hawk-Weaver. He's the one behind the scenes. Associate producer, Emily Holmes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. Hey, the donate button never closes, so please do go on to the CIS website. We'd love to have a donation. Keep us on air. We really appreciate it. Thanks, Monica, and bye, everybody. Salvatore.